What's going down, everybody? It's your boy, that guy my high, tuning back in front of the reaction. This time we got one of them audit the audits. This one is arrested for delivering a package. Cop gets sued. Yeah, I mean that just sounds wild. Like why you out here arresting the delivery man? You know what I mean? Like what did he do? So we're gonna find out. Anyways, before we jump into that, we gotta give a big shout out to all of the members of the channel real quick. We got Carrie, Laura, Sam, Epic, Jamal, Keith, Christy, Funny Farm, Manly, Misty, Sniper, Trey420, Driver Thoughts, Ryan, Kara, Marie, Mr. Pad 4, Happy Chick, Lynn, Holla Girl, Taylor, Holla Boy, Marla, Diesel, Nick, Creatively Insane, Nicole, Aaron, Mama Dukes, Robin, Amy Jane Doe, Liz, Nugget, My Hood Life, and Gary. Gang, gang, gang. You dig what I'm saying? If y'all want to get a personal shout out on all the videos, all the lives, all that good jazz, take advantage of some perks, think about hitting that join button down below. Become a member today. You dig what I'm saying? If not, please just subscribe. Hit that bell notification. It's free 99, and it helps us out tremendously. We're trying to hit 100K. You dig what I'm saying? All right. Let's jump into this, man. We got the arrested for delivering a package. Shout out to Audit the Audit. Full screen. Let's go. Let's see what the deal is. Who, when, where, and why. You know what I'm saying?
Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers plainclothes officers, reasonable suspicion, and de facto arrests, and is brought to us by Lackluster's channel. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. On July 29th, 2020, photographer and self-proclaimed gadfly journalist Sean Thomas delivered 4 affidavits to the New York Police Department Transit District 11 station, which were accepted by Desk Officer Geraldine Diaz without incident. Approximately 4 months later, on December 2nd, 2020, Mr. Thomas returned to the station to deliver another affidavit to Officer Mohammed Ashraf, which was contained in an unsealed standard manila envelope labeled with Officer Ashraf's name.
Thanks. The officer's name is on it. Huh?
Where's it coming from?
What? It's for the officer. Just hand it to the officer.
Yeah, but who you? Who you are?
I'm delivering. Just a messenger.
Just the messenger. What the fuck?
Yo.
That is a little weird.
Come over here.
Don't put your hands on me, man.
Yo, they told you to stop.
I don't give a... Don't put
They
your
told you
hands
to
on
stop.
me. I don't care. You don't put your
You
hands
stop.
on me. You don't put your
They
hands
told
on
you
me.
to stop, all right?
As Mr. Thomas is leaving the police station, a plainclothes officer grabs his arm and orders him to stop, without identifying himself as a police officer. As the name suggests, plainclothes officers are police officers who wear regular civilian clothing instead of a police uniform. While
Right.
in theory, plainclothes officers can be beneficial because they're able to blend in with the general public and prevent crime proactively, New York has a complicated negative history with plainclothes officers. The NYPD's controversial roving plainclothes anti-crime units were disbanded in 2020 by then-Commissioner Dermot Shea after years of civilian complaints that the units regularly used excessive force and disproportionately targeted people of color. According to an article in the New York Times, Commissioner Shea said that, quote, "The plainclothes units were part of an outdated policing model that too often seemed to pit officers against the communities they served. Despite the disbandment of the anti-crime units, NYPD continues to use plainclothes officers in its operations. And in early 2022, New York City Mayor, former police officer Eric Adams, vowed to reinstate the anti-crime units in response to escalating gun violence in the city. While, contrary to popular belief, plainclothes officers generally do not have to disclose their status as an officer, even when asked directly, they normally must identify themselves when stopping an individual or otherwise asserting their authority as an officer. As the Seventh Circuit explained in the 2017 case of Dornbos versus City of Chicago, quote, although some unusual circumstances may justify an officer's failure to identify himself in rare cases, it is generally not reasonable for a plainclothes officer to fail to identify himself when conducting a stop. The court in this case also referred to its 2009 decision of Catlin versus City of Wheaton, where it expressed concern about plainclothes officers failing to identify themselves, but held that, quote, it can be a reasonable tactic where the act of identifying themselves could itself reasonably be thought to have made the situation more dangerous. Here, a court would almost certainly conclude that the plainclothes officer was unreasonable in his failure to identify himself as a police officer before physically seizing Mr. Thomas, as there was no evidence that it would have been dangerous for him to do so.
Authority you got.
Come in. Sir, come in.
There you go.
Yo. Come over here, man.
Yo, get your hands
Come on,
off me.
come on.
Hold on, who are you? Come
Who
on.
are
I'm
you?
a cop too.
He's a cop.
I'm a cop
Identify
too.
yourself. He's a cop. I'm telling you.
Come
Identify
on, we're all
yourself.
cops here. We're all cops here.
Get your hands off of me.
Don't do that. We'll put you through.
Yeah,
All
put
right?
me through. Put me
Put you
through.
through.
Put me
Put you
through.
through.
We'll see how that works out.
Yeah, let's see how this works out. Because what the fuck? For delivering
No, I'm
a
not.
a letter?
I'm not sitting down. I'm not sitting down. That's right. Put me in cuffs. Go ahead. Put me in cuffs.
What's going on? You're
Put me in
delivering?
cuffs. You the sergeant?
Yeah.
You have a
Listen, put your hands down. Don't point at
you
him.
have an obligation to intervene.
got cuffs,
You have an
keep cuffs.
affirmative obligation. You got a crime?
You
got a crime?
I know what you handed me.
You have an obligation.
I know what you handed me.
Do you have a crime?
Where did you?
So you don't know if you have a crime.
We don't
So
know.
you don't know. That's not a reason to detain somebody. Now, why am I being detained?
We don't know.
I want suspicion of the crime. That's not how it works. You get a suspicion of a crime. Give me the suspicion of the crime.
The sergeant informs
Right.
Mr. Thomas that he is being detained because they do not know what is in the package he delivered. And Mr. Thomas argues that because the
What?
officers cannot tell him what crime they suspect him of, they cannot detain him. In general, police officers are not required to articulate a specific crime that they suspect an individual of committing in order to detain them. Rather, as the Supreme Court explained
guess
in
you
the
have to have a
2000
real
case of
reason to
Illinois
arrest.
versus Wardlow,
Detain and arrest
quote,
are different.
an officer may, consistent with the Fourth Amendment, conduct a brief investigatory stop when the officer has a reasonable, articulable suspicion that criminal activity is afoot. Reasonable suspicion is a less demanding standard than probable cause, which is the standard that's required to make an arrest.
Right,
And it
see.
requires a showing considerably less.
That's that stupid gray area shit. It's like, well, they're not arresting you, sir. They're putting you in handcuffs just to detain you. It's all verbiage, right? Say the wrong word and it would have been a whole situation. But the fact that we're detaining you, sir, we don't have to we can be
preponderance
as
of the
vague as
evidence,
possible.
which is a standard of proof
Like,
that equates to a
fuck.
likelihood of at least 51%. In the Wardlow case, the court noted that, quote, nervous, evasive behavior is a pertinent factor in determining reasonable suspicion, and that lawful conduct that is, quote, ambiguous and
But he wasn't being
susceptible of an
nervous.
innocent explanation can give rise to reasonable suspicion that allows officers to, quote, detain the individuals to resolve the ambiguity. Here, Mr. Thomas was not involved in criminal activity, as it's not illegal to deliver documents to a police station without identifying yourself.
Facts.
Yet, given the low standard of evidence required to conduct a Terry stop, it's still very possible that a court would conclude that the officers had reasonable suspicion to detain and investigate Mr. Thomas. It is highly unusual
Wow.
to deliver an envelope to a police department and refuse to explain what's in it or who you are. And given this evasive behavior, the officers may have suspected that Mr. Thomas was attempting a chemical weapon attack, or that there was some other dangerous substance in the
The
envelope.
paranoia
However,
is
it should be
real.
noted
Holy
that there are
shit.
also factors that weigh against a finding
I
of
get it.
reasonable
I guess
suspicion,
it's
such
been
as the
in the
fact that the
history.
envelope was unsealed and visibly only contained pieces of paper. So it's challenging to predict with any
Right.
certainty how a court would rule in this situation, particularly because the holding could vary depending on which court reviewed the case.
We're gonna check your
Oh,
pocket.
you don't have to search my pocket.
Yes, you're not
It's a Fourth Amendment violation. I'm in your custody. I'm in your custody. I'm lawful to be in your custody.
You know what?
And you have an obligation to intervene. You're
I'm
personally
asking
liable.
you who you are.
I don't give a what you're asking. What obligation am I under to answer your question?
Right.
So we don't know what's in here. We're asking you what it is. You are the one bringing this here.
That's right.
Wow.
Exactly. So
That's right.
Why are
He's
you
hella,
bringing
they
it?
hella, that's, this is,
We
bro,
asked the
this
questions
is
here
wild.
because you came into our
I'm
place.
under no lawful obligation to answer your question.
Yeah, because you
I
don't.
am? What law? Cite the law that I'm obligated to answer your
You're not-
question.
you're not-
Cite it. Set the up and cite it.
I'll tell you, it's simple. You brought this here.
Yeah.
We need to know what it is.
Okay, fine. What
Open it.
crime have I committed? What
We're
crime have
about
I
Right,
to find
yeah.
out. I'll tell you that.
While Mr. Thomas is in handcuffs, the officers search his pockets and eventually discover a knife. It's important to note that even if the officers had reasonable suspicion to detain Mr. Thomas, returning him to the police station, placing him in handcuffs, and searching his pockets were likely unconstitutional
Yeah,
violations
there
of
was
his
no
Fourth
reason
Amendment
for any
rights.
of this shit,
In the
bro.
1983 case of
Open
Florida
the fucking
versus
envelope
Royer,
and
the
look.
Supreme Court held that, quote, Terry and its progeny created only limited exceptions to the general rule that seizures of the person require probable cause to arrest. Detentions may be investigative, yet violative of the Fourth Amendment, absent probable cause. In the name of investigating a person who is no more than suspected of criminal activity, the police may not carry out a full search of the person
Damn.
or of his automobile
So it's
or
like- it's
other
right
effects.
there. That's-
Nor may
that's
the police seek to
fucking
verify their
clear.
suspicions by means that approach the conditions of arrest. In other words, even if officers do not formally arrest an individual, an investigatory stop can ripen into a de facto arrest if the detention is sufficiently intrusive. And if officers do not have probable cause for an arrest, then a de facto arrest is unconstitutional. As the Second Circuit explained in the 2004 case of U.S. versus Vargas, when determining whether a Terry stop has ripened into a de facto arrest, the Second Circuit, which includes New York, considers, quote, the amount of force used by the police, the need for such force, and the extent to which an individual's freedom of movement was restrained, and in particular, such factors as the number of agents involved, whether the target of the stop was suspected of being armed, the duration of the stop, and the physical treatment of the suspect, including whether or not handcuffs were used. According to NYPD procedure number 212-11, although officers may conduct an external frisk for weapons and request consent to search an individual during a Terry stop, they cannot conduct a search without consent. The procedure also states that officers should not transport or otherwise move the suspect from the location where they're stopped unless the suspect consents, or there's an exigency necessitating relocation, such as a hostile crowd or safety threat. Although placing a suspect in handcuffs does not automatically transform a Terry stop into an arrest, when combined with the other circumstances of this situation, it is likely that a court would conclude that Mr. Thomas's detention had ripened into de facto arrest, and that because the officers lacked the probable cause needed to arrest Mr. Thomas before finding the knife, their actions violated the Fourth Amendment.
That's not how it works. You don't detain somebody and then go on a fishing
Sir,
expedition.
you can't just drop a package here and walk out and don't want to answer anything. We gotta know what you're dropping off.
You better have a crime. You better have a crime.
What is dropping off?
You better have a
We
crime.
asked you who you are. You refuse.
I'm under no obligation to answer your question. What
dropping off
lawful
something here,
obligation am I under?
sir.
What
you dropping off
lawful
a package
obligation
here.
am I under to answer your
Sir,
question?
you dropping off a
Like,
package.
none of them want to
I
answer that
concede
question.
Now, what
Okay,
lawful
who are
obligation
you?
am I under to answer your
You
question?
want me to accept a package? Who are you?
What lawful obligation am
That's
I
not
under to
a
It's
answer
for our
your
own
question?
safety. I don't know what's this.
What
What is
lawful
this? What is
obligation am I
this?
under to
Sir,
answer
what
your
is this?
question?
What is this?
Open it.
I'm not gonna open it. I don't know what is it. Where's your ID that you're a delivery person?
What obligation am I under to
You're
You're supposed to have your ID. If you're a delivery person, you're supposed to expose your ID.
lawful search and seizure, you're party to it.
If you,
Your ass is out.
that's all right. This is, who's this?
As long as you say it's all right.
So do you have any cash on you? Where's your ID as a delivery person? Where's your ID? You have a delivery ID that you work for a company that you deliver package? I want to see that ID.
Bruh.
And I want to call your company and see
I
who
do
you
not
are.
consent to searches and seizures. This is against my will.
After the officers completed their search, Mr. Thomas was taken to a holding
Bruh.
cell where he was held for over 5 hours. After being charged with 1 count of criminal possession of a weapon, Mr. Thomas was eventually released, and the charge against him was later dropped. On December 7th, 2020, Mr. Thomas filed a formal complaint with the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and on October 13th, 2021, he filed a pro se civil rights lawsuit in the Bronx, New York Supreme Court. As of the date of this episode, both the complaint investigation and the lawsuit are still pending. Overall, the NYPD officers get an
Get
F.
an F.
Because
Yeah.
although they may have had
Fucking
reasonable
terrible.
suspicion to detain Mr. Thomas, they maintained a
Terrible.
hostile and combative demeanor throughout the interaction, violated several aspects of department policy, and likely subjected Mr. Thomas to an unconstitutional de facto arrest and search. This is a clear instance of the tactics that led to the disbandment of the NYPD's anti-crime units. And these types of unnecessarily aggressive, unconstitutional encounters work to further alienate the department's officers from the community they're sworn to protect. Nearly every action the officers took in this interaction escalated the situation, which caused Mr. Thomas to become more hostile and less cooperative. Policing is most effective when it's a collaborative effort between the police and the individuals that they serve. And when officers violate the rights of citizens in such an open and unapologetic
Yep,
way,
they
they
lose all
lose the
trust.
trust and respect
Yep.
of the community.
Facts.
It appears that Mr. Thomas has a legitimate civil rights claim after this encounter, and it'll be interesting to see whether he can succeed without legal representation. Mr. Thomas gets a B-. Because although he demonstrated a clear misunderstanding of the concept of reasonable suspicion and maintained a hostile and combative demeanor throughout the encounter, he verbally invoked his right to remain silent, refused to consent to an unconstitutional search, and took appropriate action after the incident by filing a complaint and a civil rights lawsuit. While Mr. Thomas was not legally required to identify himself or answer the NYPD officers' questions, providing a reasonable amount of information in response to the officers' questions was arguably the most productive way to end this encounter without
Facts.
escalation.
Agreed.
If Mr. Thomas had simply explained to the officers that he was delivering an affidavit, then he likely could have dispelled their suspicions without having to identify himself. while Mr. Thomas was not responsible for preventing an unconstitutional police escalation, this interaction highlights the notion that uniformly invoking the right to remain silent is not always beneficial, and it can be helpful for citizens to provide limited information to dispel reasonable suspicion in certain circumstances. Another important issue to discuss is the fact that while researching this episode, I discovered a 2016 post on Mr. Thomas's Blogspot page suggesting that citizens had the right and duty to kill police officers who violate the Constitution. Mr. Thomas has a long history with the NYPD, having been arrested multiple times and subjected to various levels of force while attempting to photograph them. And I understand why he would have a negative view of the police based on these encounters. However, advocating violence against other human beings, including police officers, is never acceptable. And I urge Mr. Thomas to reconsider his position on this issue. Let us know if there's an interaction or legal topic you would like us to discuss.
That was left field right there. Like, I wasn't expecting him to say some shit like that. Like, oh shit, like, that's how you really feel? God damn. Anyways, man, y'all let me know what y'all thought about that on the comments below. That definitely, it was like, I think the grades that they got and the reasonings for the grades were like spot on. I don't think that there was really anything you could add or take away from that. Like, yeah, the cops just did a very bad job at that whole situation. The whole interaction sucked. And then, oh boy, did a pretty, shitty job too, but it was better than the cops. And, there was definitely, lots of growing that both parties need to do. But, yeah, y'all let me know what y'all thought about that down in the comments below. I'm going to catch y'all on the next one. Peace.